By air, land, and sea, Russia has launched a devastating attack on Ukraine, an European democracy of 44 million people, and its forces are on the outskirts of the capital, Kyiv. For months, President Vladimir Putin denied he would not invade his neighbor, but then he tore up a peace deal, sending troops across border in Ukraine's north, east, and south. As the number of dead climbs, he stands accused of shattering peace in Europe. What happened next will jeopardize the continent's entire security structure. Now let's talk about some key issues. Why have Russian troops attacked? Russian troops are advancing on Ukraine's capital from several directions after Russia's leader ordered the invasion. In a pre-dawn TV address on 24 February, he declared Russia could not feel safe, develop, and exist because of what he claimed was a constant threat for modern Ukraine. Airports and military headquarters were hit first, near the cities across Ukraine. Then tanks and troops rolled into Ukraine from the north, east, and south, from Russia and its ally Belarus. Many of President Putin's arguments were being challenged. He claimed his goal was to protect the people subjected to bullying and genocide and aim for the demilitarization and De-Nazification of Ukraine. Many of President Putin's arguments were being challenged. His goal was to protect the people subjected to bullying and genocide and aim for the demilitarization and De-Nazification of Ukraine. How could I be a Nazi? Said Volodymyr Zelensky, who likened Russia's onslaught on Nazi Germany's invasion in World War II. President Putin has frequently accused Ukraine of being taken over by extremists. Ever since pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted in 2014 after months of protests against his rule, which Russia believed it was a coup. Russia then retaliated by seizing the southern region of Crimea and triggering a rebellion in the east, backing separatists who have fought Ukrainian forces in a war that have claimed 14,000 lives. Late in 2021, Russia began deploying big numbers of troops close to Ukraine's border, while repeatedly denying it was going to attack. Then Mr. Putin scrapped a 2015 peace deal for the east and recognized areas under rebel control as independent, which include Luhansk and Donetsk region, both called the Donbas region. Russia has long resisted Ukraine's moves towards the European Union and the West Defensive Military Alliance, NATO. Announcing Russia's invasion, he accused NATO of threatening our historic future as a nation. How far will Russia go? It is now clear that Russia is seeking to overthrow Ukraine's democratically elected government. Its aim is that Ukraine be freed from oppression and cleansed of the Nazis. President Zelensky said he has been warned. The enemy has designated me as target number 1. My family is target number 2. Mr. Putin has spoken of bringing to court those who committed numerous bloody crimes against civilians. What Russia's plans are for Ukraine are unknown, but it faces stiff resistance from a deeply hostile population. In January, the United Kingdom accused Russia of plotting to install a pro-Moscow puppet to lead Ukraine's government, a claim rejected at the time by Russia as nonsense. One unconfirmed intelligence report suggests Russia aimed to split the country into two. In the days before the invasion, when up to 200,000 troops were near Ukraine's border, Russia's public focus was purely on the eastern area of Luhansk and Donetsk. By recognizing the separatist area controlled by Russian forces as independent, Mr. Putin was telling the world that they are no longer part of Ukraine. Then he revealed that he supported their claims to far more Ukrainian territories. The self-styled People's Republic covered little more than a third of the whole Ukraine's Luhansk and Donetsk region, but the rebel covered the rest too. How dangerous is the invasion for Europe? There are terrifying times for the people of Ukraine and horrifying for the rest of the continent, witnessing a major power invasion in European neighbor for the first time since World War II. Dozens have died already in what Germany was dubbed Putin's war. Both civilians and soldiers, and for European leaders, this invasion has brought some of the darkest hours since the 1940s. It was said, France Emmanuel Macron, a turning point in Europe's history, recalling the Cold War days of the Soviet Union. Vladimir Zelensky spoke of Ukraine bid to avoid a new iron curtain closing Russia off from the civilized world. For the family of both armed forces, there will be anxious days ahead. Ukrainians have already suffered a grueling 8 years war with Russian proxies in the Donbas region. The military has called up all reservists aged 18 to 60 years old. Top US military official Mark Milley said the scale of Russian forces would mean a horrific scenario with conflict in dense urban areas. This is not a war that Russia's population was prepared for, as the invasion was approved by the Russian parliament. The invasion has knocked on effect for many other countries bordering both Russia and Ukraine. 5 countries are seeing an influx of refugees, while the United Nations Children Agency says its projected scenario is for up to 5 million refugees. Poland, Moldova, Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary are all braced for arrivals. What can the West do? NATO has put warplanes on alert, but the Western Alliance had made clear there are no plans to send combat troops to Ukraine itself. Instead, they have offered advisors, weapons, and field hospitals. Meanwhile, 5,000 NATO troops have been deployed in the Baltic states and Poland. Another 4,000 could be sent to Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Slovakia. At the same time, the West is targeting Russia's economic, financial, and institutions and individuals. The EU and UK have imposed personal sanctions on President Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The EU also wants to restrict Russian access to capital markets and cut off its industry from latest technology and defense. It has also targeted 351 MPs who back Russia's operation in the rebel-held region. Germany has halted approval of Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline, a major investment by both Russia and European companies. The US is targeting 10 of Russia's biggest financial institutions with about 80% of its banking assets, so they will struggle to do transactions in dollar or euros. The UK say all major Russian banks would have their assets frozen, with 100 individuals and entities targeted, and Russia's national airline Aeroflot will also be banned from landing in the United Kingdom, although the Russians have banned that of the UK from entering the Russian space. Ukraine has urged its allies to stop buying Russian oil and gas. The 3 Baltic states have called on the whole international community to disconnect Russia's banking system from the international SWIFT payment system. That could badly affect the US and the European economies, and Germany says is reluctant to agree to it. Russia's city of St. Petersburg will no longer be able to host this year's Champions League final for security reasons. What does Putin want? President Putin partly blamed his decision to attack on NATO's eastward expansion. He early complained Russia has nowhere further to retreat to. They do think we will just sit idly by, he asked. Ukraine is seeking a clear timeline to join NATO, and Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov explained, for us, it's obviously mandatory to ensure Ukraine never ever become a member of NATO. Last year, President Putin wrote a long piece describing Russians and Ukrainians as one nation, and he has described the collapse of the Soviet Union in December 1991 as the disintegration of historical Russia. He has claimed modern Russia was entirely created by communist Russia and is now a puppet state controlled by the West. President Putin has also argued that if Ukraine joins NATO, the alliance might try to retake Crimea. But if Russia is focused on Ukraine, it demands that NATO return to pre-1997. But Russia is not just focused on Ukraine, it demands that NATO return to its pre-1997 borders. Mr. Putin wants NATO to remove its forces and military infrastructure from member states that joined the alliance from 1997 and not to deploy strike weapons near Russia's border. That means Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and the Baltics. In President Putin's eye, the West promised back in 1990 that NATO would expand, not an inch in the East, but did so anyway. That was before the collapse of the Soviet Union. However, so the promise made to the then Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. What has NATO said? NATO is a defensive alliance with an open door policy to new members, and the 30 member states are adamant that will not change. NATO, which claims is a defensive alliance, which many countries have doubts anyway, with an open door policy to new members, and the 30 member states are adamant that will not change. There is no prospect of Ukraine joining for a long time, as Germany's chancellor has made clear. But the idea that any current NATO country would give up its membership is a non-starter. Is there a diplomatic way out? Not for now. Ukraine has called for talks, but Russia said they can only be held on condition that Kyiv agree to surrender and demilitarized, and that may not happen. As well as the war, any eventual deal would need to involve the West in the East and arms control. The US has offered to start talks on limiting short and medium-range missiles, as well as on new treaty on intercontinental missiles. Russia wanted all US nuclear arms barred from beyond their national territories. Russia has been positive towards a proposed transparency mechanism for mutual checks on missile bases.